Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. The big story, House Bill 1523, also known as the Protecting Freedom of Conscience from Government Discrimination Act. It's now set to become law. It has set off waves of support and opposition, not only here in Mississippi, but across the country. Governor Bryant signed the bill this week.
It protects everyone's rights under the law, and that's what I tried to do is I signed it to make sure that that's what we are doing, protecting these civil liberties of the faith-based community while not discriminating against any other group. That's the position we're trying to land on.
Supporters say the legislation is designed to protect government workers and others from punishment when exercising their religious beliefs. For example, it would protect government officials who do not want to issue marriage licenses to gay couples based on religion. Also, some businesses involved in wedding services would be protected if they refuse to serve some customers. Opponents say it's hateful discrimination and goes against federal law. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled gay marriage legal last summer.
Civil rights organizations are standing unified here across this state and across this country, standing unanimously opposed to this legislation because of the harm it will inflict upon thousands of citizens. Now, make no mistake about it. This hateful law isn't just morally wrong. It's an affront to the values that we all hold dear as Americans. Think about it. Fairness, equality, and freedom. Those are all bipartisan values held by Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike.
People of religious conviction, people of faith, have rights too. And the scales of justice, as the governor said, don't just go one way. There should be protections for people of both persuasions. And this bill that the governor signed is a common sense approach to allow people to exercise their convictions based on their faith without fear of government persecution. And that's what people need to remember. I want to commend Governor Bryant. I thank him, and I look forward to shaking his hand.
Several states, including New York, Vermont, Washington, Minnesota, and Connecticut, have banned state travel to Mississippi in response to the legislation. Many big corporations, Nissan, Toyota, Ingalls, GE, Levi's, and Pepsi, have come out in opposition to the bill. And Mississippi Congressman Benny Thompson has asked the U.S. Attorney General to file a lawsuit to block it. Meanwhile, several church leaders, religious groups, and conservative organizations such as the Southern Baptist Convention, the United Pentecostal Church, the Family Research Council, and the Heritage Foundation are all praising Governor Bryant for signing the bill. The ACLU of Mississippi is against the legislation. The Mississippi Center for Public Policy is for it. MPB's Paul Boger discussed the bill with leaders from both groups.
Joining us to discuss House Bill 1523, Eric Fleming is the Director of Advocacy and Policy for the ACLU of Mississippi. Forrest Thigpen is the President of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy. Thank you both for joining us today. Now, the Public Policy Center, they released a poll that said a majority of Mississippians actually supported this particular legislation, correct?
Right. 63% of the public in general. But more than half of every demographic breakdown by race and age and political party and geographic area, even young people are saying that they supported, a majority supported this.
Eric, is that what you're seeing?
Well, looking at the same poll, I think it was a very generic way of asking the question. I think if the question was asked, should businesses be allowed to discriminate or push people away because of those religious beliefs, I don't think you would have had that high of a favorable rating in that poll.
Now, there have been a number of protests over the last week or so dealing with this particular legislation. What are you hearing from protesters?
Well, people are dismayed. I mean, I think if the intent of the bill was to protect 501c3s, nonprofit religious organizations, I think that would have been fair game for what you just described for us. But when you start expanding it to private business, to publicly traded companies, and the like, I mean, it's really sends a chilling message. And you know, historically, 60-some years ago. I mean, we're not talking about a long time ago. 60-some years ago, people used religious freedom to discriminate against African Americans, and that's the tone that we see in this legislation.
Well, the fact is, many people consider marriage to be an act of worship. It goes beyond just serving. We've heard from many people who say, I'm happy to serve homosexual people, regardless of their sexual gender or identity, sexual orientation. I'm glad to serve them, but when it comes to the issue of the act of marriage and celebrating that, that to me is an act of worship, and I have to draw the line. And so for my business, I should not be forced to participate in something that is absolutely against my religious beliefs, when that couple can go to another place and still get their constitutional rights satisfied. But if I'm forced to do this and participate, I don't get the chance to exercise my constitutional rights.
What this bill does is the government is interfering and basically sanctioning folks to be discriminatory. And if the language was as tight as you're describing it, probably would have a more interesting discussion, but the language is not that tight. It is very, very broad. And to me, anytime you deal with legislation that's broad, it becomes very, very dangerous. And I would not want to wait till July 2nd and see how people interpret that. I mean, I think and Forrest is a good guy, and I know that the intentions are good, but the language in that bill that he's talking about is not as crystal clear as he's trying to describe it.
And I think that's why there's been so much debate, so much, to me, misunderstanding, is because the way the bill is drafted, it does require kind of jumping back and forth to understand that some of the things that people are thinking are being opened up actually are pretty well restricted in how they are applied.
You know, quickly, Eric, tell me, why shouldn't the state in some way try to protect those people who believe that marriage should be between one man and one woman?
Because the state already has that protection. I mean, it's in our state constitution, it's in the United States Constitution, that you can express your religious freedom and you can say what you want to say in your church. You can say what you want to say in your mosque or your synagogue. But when you try to apply that to a point where, say, I'm not going to serve this person, I'm not going to cater to this person, I'm not going to do my constitutionally appointed duty to either issue a marriage license or whatever else. I mean, you've got a scenario where somebody's going to get a blood test, and the clinic can say, well, we conscientiously or religiously object to that, right? To go get the marriage license. It's just, to get photographs taken. I mean, it's an incredible burden that the government is trying to put on a certain section of the community, and I don't think Mississippi should be trying to do that.
Forrest, I'll give you the last word. You know, whether you like it or not, a large portion of Mississippians believe this is some form of discrimination. You know, how do you address that law with their interpretation of discrimination?
Well, again, what the bill actually does is more of a defensive bill. It's not offensive. It's not creating really anything new. But for people who are wondering, in light of the Supreme Court decision, what freedom do I have to operate, this helps provide clarity and does not create any license to discriminate. Circuit clerks have to provide, their office has to provide a marriage license, or they don't qualify for the protections under the bill. So there are lots of things in here that are preparing people so that they can know, here are the rules of the road.
One last question. You know, Eric, what is the ACLU going to do now? Are they planning some kind of challenge to this law?
Well, we're carefully examining all the options at this particular point. This is something new. I won't say this is the worst bill out here, but we feel it's pretty egregious as far as where the line is drawn. And so, like I said, we're looking at it, and we'll pretty soon let people know what our strategy is going to be.
All right, that'll about do it. Forrest, Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
The new law is set to go into effect July 1st, but legal experts are questioning whether it will. Is it constitutional? MPB's Karen Brown recently spoke with Matt Steffi, a professor at the Mississippi College School of Law, during MPB News Mississippi Edition.
This law ranges somewhere between redundant of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act from 2 years ago and impotent in the sense that it's trying to push back against federal law, which it can't do. I do not think this law will be in effect ever. I think it will be there'll be a restraining order issued at the beginning, and that will be made permanent by the end of the litigation. It'll be interesting to see to what extent, if any, the Attorney General really tries to defend this law.
The supporters of the bill say this is not about discrimination, and it's a very narrow field of who can do what.
It's very discriminating. Yeah, no, it's just because you say things doesn't make it true. But if I say I'm going to protect A, but nothing else, I am discriminating, whether in a good or a bad way, but I am discriminating in favor of that set of beliefs, that an action's motivated by people on that set of beliefs. In the same way that I am discriminating if I say we're going to give a job preference to people who believe in Jesus, not Allah, I am discriminating in that sense. It's not discriminating in the sense of putting legal penalties on a group identified by race, religion, or otherwise. But in the common use of the word, it singles out a set of religious beliefs for government protection to the exclusion of everything else. And those beliefs are already protected in the strongest terms by the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in a religion-neutral way 2 years ago.
Here's what some of you are saying on our Facebook page about this. Sammy Moon says, absurd, stupid piece of legislation that will end up costing big bucks to unsuccessfully defend in courts. Sheer madness. William Moody says, Christian people can now be free to exercise their beliefs. Sally Gray says, I wish they'd assess the proponents of 1523 with the cost of defending it. Ridiculous to spend taxpayer dollars on this foolishness. Elaine Bullock says, I am so proud that our governor has stood up for what is right. Let's dive into the reporter's notebook now. Paul Boger joins us again now from MPB News to talk about, let's talk about some other bills at this point, some things that are making their way to the governor's desk. Let's start with charter schools.
Charter schools, yeah. You know, we've talked about a charter school expansion so far this year. That's on its way to the governor's desk. Essentially what it would do is allow students that live in C, D, or F districts to cross district lines to go to a charter school of their choice.
Because currently, if there's a charter school in their district, and they're only in the Jackson area right now, you have to stay within your school district, right?
Right, that's exactly right. And according to the law right now, charter schools can only be established in D or F districts. If you want to create a charter school in A, B, or C district, you have to do it with the district's permission. So, you know, this really opens it up to go beyond Jackson. You know, right now there are 2 charter schools in Jackson, and really the only folks that can go to those schools are living in Jackson, considering the surrounding area. They're fairly decent schools. So you're going to start seeing schools maybe pop up in Hattiesburg, some of the more larger cities, Meridian maybe, Vicksburg, but maybe not quite yet in the rural counties, because it may not be that popular or that feasible to create a charter school in those areas, but you might see them in some of the moderate cities.
Guns in church. That's another one we've talked about during this session that would enable a church to designate certain members who could go undergo firearms training and then be armed on Sunday morning or whenever they have services, and then be protected somewhat by the law if they have to defend their members against an intruder.
Right. So you've mentioned the castle doctrine that, you know, if something happens in the church, they can defend themselves. Well, what it also does is it allows a church to establish a security team, a trained security team, a team that has training in firearms training, and they can have a concealed weapon as a group in the church. It also extends concealed carry to people, to holsters. So you can have a holstered concealed weapon without a permit now. It's an expansion of last year's law that allowed people to carry a gun in their briefcase or purse without a concealed permit. So this is a pretty major expansion.
And this one's on the governor's desk?
This one is on the governor's desk. Likely we'll see it signed next few days, I believe, because, you know, this has been a fairly popular bill here in the state. So we're going to see that one probably become law.
All right, what do you predict for next week? What should we see?
Well, you know, we've gotten through all the general bills. They're being negotiated and worked on by the House and Senate. Now we're going to see is the making of the budget. You know, that's where we're at. This is going to be a pretty major week, 2 weeks for that. So one thing we haven't seen though is a plan to fix the state's roads and bridges. You know, beginning of the session, it was touted by folks like the Mississippi Economic Council too that, you know, this was going to be the year of transportation. They're going to come up with a plan to, you know, put more money to roads and bridges. That's fizzled out. At this point, there's no real plan to do that. So there's talk of adding that somewhere to the tax cut plan that was passed by the Senate and a much smaller version in the House. Folks really want to get this done, but maybe under the Republican leadership, there may not be a real desire because it may include some form of tax increase.
Maybe it will come up in discussions about the budget upcoming. Paul Boger with MPB News. Thank you as always.
Thank you.
Well, as we were talking about, the House has scaled down the Senate tax cut plan, also known as the Taxpayer Pay Raise Act. The House approved the amended version by a vote of 76-42 this week. It reduces the tax cuts to $135 million. The original Senate plan called for a $575 million cut in corporate franchise and income tax. The bill was also amended to include a provision that it would not take effect until a state lottery is created. But several attempts to attach funding for those road and bridge repairs failed, and that frustrated some House members who are trying to address the infrastructure issue this session.
I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen a day from now, a month from now, a year from now. But it's going to happen. There's a bridge out there with somebody's name on it. Somebody's going to have to cross it. Somebody's going to have to cross it. Maybe more than one. Maybe 5, 10, maybe 30 people. But when that happens, look in the mirror, because you can blame yourself for that one.
MDOT essentially is running on the same dollars that they had in 1989 once the 1987 tax increase was put into full effect in 1989. So they're operating essentially with those same dollars today when construction costs have gone up about 400%. So it's illogical to believe that that agency can continue to sustain our infrastructure with those dollars. That's unrealistic.
I'm hoping that we will continue to look at it because the problem is such a serious situation and it's a disaster waiting to happen.
House Transportation Committee Chairman Charles Busby says there could be as much as $150 million in savings to be gained in the MDOT budget. He says, coupled with finding new money, it's the recipe to get it done. Well, let's get straight to the point with views from both sides of the political aisle. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones Law Firm and a former member of the House. Lucian Smith is filling in again for Austin Barber this week. He's an attorney and the former chief of staff for Governor Bryant. Currently, he is with the law firm of Balch and Bingham. Lucian, good to have you back with us. I'm filling in for Austin this week, and Brandon, as always, glad to have you. Let's talk about 1523. It's dominating headlines, Facebook feeds, Twitter. Everybody seems to have an opinion about it. Lucian, let me start with you. Were you surprised, or is this about the amount of backlash you expected from this bill?
You know, I think it's about the amount of backlash I expected. We saw something similar several years ago when the legislature passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. There was a great deal of national backlash. I think, you know, one difference here, and part of the reason that the backlash seems to be enduring, I think, is that there wasn't. This was not a compromise proposal in the way that RFRA ultimately was several years ago, and you had people like Matt Staffy, who were hardly shills for the right, saying that RFRA was not a discriminatory, not an unconstitutional bill, in part because of those compromises. That didn't happen here, and so it makes it much more difficult to defend it as a non-discriminatory bill, and so I think the backlash is probably going to continue for a little while.
Yeah, I guess if the legislature was looking for a way to wind up as a line item on a city council meeting in Vermont and Connecticut and New York, they found a way to do it and to get press releases fired up from international businesses, and you know they figured out a formula for doing that.
And it's certainly, I mean, it is never a good thing for Mississippi to be getting extended amounts of negative national attention. I will say some of these cities and states from other parts of the country that are declaring travel bans, I mean, that will have some practical effect, but by and large, I think that's political locally. I'm not convinced that Vermont before was sending just loads of people to have conferences in Mississippi. I think that's much more about the domestic politics inside of those individual states.
Yeah, I think it's just the fact that we have to have those conversations. You know, as we get into the weeds of this bill and we talk about the various ways it may impact people when they enter the courthouse or in their wedding planning, whatever the case may be, I think the disconcerting thing is that we are spending an inordinate amount of time on issues like this one. I mean, let's go back to the rundown we just had a moment ago. Creating militias in churches. The week before, we were talking about this days-long fight over defunding Planned Parenthood of the $500 check they received from the state government. Now we're talking about this. I think you can say something about a legislature's value system based on what they spend their time on. And we have spent all this inordinate time on these issues while we don't have a roads plan and while we don't have a budget on paper.
Look, I will concede that 1523 was a solution in search of a problem inside of Mississippi, but I do think you've got, you know, it is driven by what people have seen in other problems. We don't have persecution, to my knowledge. I don't think the state is persecuting evangelical Christians in Mississippi, but you do see examples of it in other places. I mean, the example that everybody likes to point out is the baker in Oregon who ended up essentially being run out of business because they had violated an Oregon non-discrimination law by declining to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding. And I think you have some people here who I, by and large, have a great deal of respect for, who take the position that, you know, the culture in Mississippi is on their side right now. That could always change, as it has in other parts of the state. And so they want to enact this type of legislation now rather than wait down the road until the tide is turned on them. And they think they might be subject to the same sort of things that have happened in other states. That said, I do wish that the bill had been sent to conference. I wish that there had been a little bit more time taken so that you could have both assuaged the fears of people who are concerned about government persecution for holding traditional religious beliefs on marriage, while at the same time being able to work out some of the things that Matt Steffi and others have written about the overbreadth of the law.
We mentioned big companies at the beginning of the program that have sent a letter to the governor saying that they oppose this. But is that just a statement, or might we see some true economic repercussions from something like this? What do you think, Brandon?
Well, I think that companies do care about the climate in a state before they make an investment there. I think that, you know, Lucian and I were talking off camera about this. I don't know that we're going to see companies pulling products off the shelves or pulling plants back that are already there. I think that's probably a little far-fetched. But I do think it can factor in when companies are deciding who to do business with and where to do business. And if given an opportunity to do business with a state that has decided not to wade in this way, they might go that way rather than to face backlash from dealing with a state that's decided to put itself right in the middle of this conversation.
I think for the most part, again, it's a little bit like Vermont saying we're not going to hold any conferences in Mississippi because of this. I mean, I don't see those businesses ever actually pulling their products off the shelf. I think they're going to continue to do business with Mississippi, and I think in the end, if they start deciding where they're going to operate or build a new manufacturing plant, it's going to have much more to do with dollars and cents about workforce, tax structure, incentive structure than it does a bill that ultimately I think most people are going to forget about over time.
Yeah, I just on the substance of the bill, I think it's important because I've kind of talked more broadly. I do think it's unnecessary, unconstitutional, and absolutely unfair. I do think that before the year is out, we're likely to not have this as the law of the land in Mississippi anymore. I think we are inviting lawsuits. I think we're inviting unnecessary challenges, perhaps more expenditures of taxpayer money for things at a time when we could really use that to patch up our roads and bridges. Just an unnecessary divergence from the serious business that our state needs to be focused on now.
Well, some of it, I mean, you go back to, and you're right, there's no doubt in my mind there's going to be a lawsuit over this. I think it's probably a safe bet that, you know, it doesn't have a severability clause in it. So I think there's a reasonable possibility that this gets struck down in its entirety at some point this calendar year. But one thing that I think a lot of people paid attention to was during the Supreme Court arguments in Oberfeld, which was the decision where the Supreme Court said that the Constitution required same-sex marriage, it requires every state to perform marriages irrespective of the gender structure of the couple. The court asked the Solicitor General, what does this mean for 501c3 religious institutions that decline to perform same-sex marriages? Are we going to have to, as they did in the Bob Jones case, take away their tax-exempt status? And the Solicitor General of the United States essentially said that's very possible. They could not they couldn't create, and I'm not sure that you could create, a legal rationale without legislation like this that prevents that sort of punishment. So I think you have, again, you have people of faith who don't want their tax-exempt status to be taken away because they've adhered to a traditional view. And I think most of us could agree on a lot of what was in that bill. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks we should fine the local Baptist church because they declined to rent out their parish hall for a same-sex wedding.
Well, you said a moment ago, solution in search of a problem. And I don't think there's any question that it is. I think the Solicitor General was probably mistaken. The First Amendment is sufficient. I mean, the clauses that protect religion in this state, and then on the other side, protect the establishment of religion in this country, are strong, and they're very strong. And the notion that a church can't make a decision about what it does with its religious services or how it uses its facilities, look, I just cannot think of an example where that has been an issue. And so I think we, again, are out here tilting a little bit at a time when we really need to be focused on things that are more acute and more of a focus in Mississippi.
All right, we'll let that be the last word. Lucian, Brandon, thank you both. And thank you for joining us on At Issue. We'll see you again next week.